All information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not consider your individual circumstances. You should consider the appropriateness of this information with regards to your individual objectives, financial situation, and needs. Welcome to Sharing More Than the Sheets, a podcast to help you and your partner make better financial and lifestyle decisions so that you can both focus on the things that you love. I'm your host, Michael Curry, financial planner, green thumb, husband, and just dad. This segment is called Michael's Magic Moment. It's my opportunity to play a little snippet from one of our previous episodes which resonated with our listeners, that I received feedback from, or I felt really had an impact on some people's lives. Hope you enjoy. Today we're going back to an episode where I talk about risk and understanding risk, as well as the different types of risk involved. As an advisor, risk is a normal part of our life, and it's part of investing, it's part of really any decision that we make. There's always risk involved, and it's really important to understand risk. It's important to understand what risks you're being exposed to when you make certain decisions, whether it's an investing decision, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a holiday. And it's important to really be comfortable with that risk, because when you understand it, when you're comfortable with it, whatever the outcome is, you feel like you own that decision, and you feel that it was a decision that you made and that it was an informed decision and that you knew what you were doing. So it's an easier pill to swallow if things don't go the way they're supposed to or the way you were hoping they would. As well as that, I find when I'm talking to my clients and we're talking about investing, a lot of people want to invest, but they're scared, and they're scared of the risk, which of course anyone would be scared of risk. No one likes risk. But at the end of the day, going back to the basic principle of the fact that the higher the risk, the higher the return, it's important to have a discussion, and it's important to understand how much risk you're willing to tolerate. And as I said just then, it's important to understand what risk you're exposing yourself to. So this can only be done with research, talking to your advisor, making an informed decision, because when you understand risk, it makes it so much easier to make these decisions. It makes it easier to just pull the trigger and just do it. It makes it easier to stop, to not sit on the fence anymore, and to make a decision to invest. And it also makes it easier when you're trying to evaluate your options as to what you should invest in. Should you buy property? Should you buy shares? Should you do both? Should you put money into your super? Should you just leave money in the bank? So there are so many different decisions, and each person's circumstance is entirely different. And that's very important, because the level of risk that a 20-year-old is going to take with $5,000 is very different to the level of risk that a 60-year-old is going to take with $500,000. So it really depends on that person's goals at the time, and it depends on what their other assets are. And once you understand risk, it makes investing a lot more comfortable, and it won't just help you understand risk, but it'll also help you understand what you're actually doing so that you can invest and hopefully enjoy the experience. Today I want to talk about the different factors that you need to take into account when looking at how much risk you need to take, because risk is part of life. We've all heard of the saying that the higher the risk, the higher the return, and the lower the risk, the lower the return. And that applies to everything in life, I feel. As an example, if you wanted to take a holiday, taking a risk, spending the money, and going on an overseas holiday is most likely going to be a lot more exciting and give you more of a reward than spending no money and having a holiday in your own backyard. Now, it's easier to say, yes, I'll just take on more risk, but when it comes to your own money, and when I have discussions with my clients about these things, it's not as easy as it sounds, especially when there's a fair bit of money on the line, or a fair bit of, there's an outcome on the line when we're talking your retirement, or when we're talking your children's education. Now, one of the most important things you should do first is to work out your risk profile, to work out what type of an investor you are, and to work out, as an advisor, we use a series of questions, but just to essentially work out whether you are a high risk investor, low risk, medium risk, etc. And there's different ways to work out what that profile is. Now, the first one is to understand your risk tolerance. Now, what that is, a risk tolerance is essentially how much risk you can personally tolerate. So sometimes this involves having a trade-off discussion, whether it's with your advisor or with yourself, but just to work out, from a financial perspective, my capacity allows me to take on X amount of risk. I can tolerate this much risk because if markets were to drop this much potentially, then I can handle that. The other part about it as well is when you understand your risk tolerance and your risk profile, it helps you understand what type of investments you should be looking at. Because when we talk risk profiles, there are many different names for these, but just as an example, moderate, conservative, balanced, growth, high growth, aggressive, these are all different terms, and essentially they all mean different things as well to different, depending on which, if you're looking at a super product, for example, or you're talking to different advisors, they will sometimes use different terms. But essentially each profile will help you understand how much risk you're exposing yourself to. And a very, very important point and something to really consider when you're looking at investments is your time horizon. How long are you investing for? And these things are all going to also affect your risk tolerance. So as an example, if you're investing money that you need most likely in about 3, 6, or 12 months, then you're most likely not going to go towards a very high risk investment because markets fluctuate, markets go through cycles. And the last thing you want is 3 or 6 months to come, you need the money, but the market's down, depending on what you've invested in. Whereas if it's a long-term investment, you can sail through any ups and downs in that period of time and have a bit more confidence knowing that markets will be in a position where you'll feel comfortable drawing down your investments. Now, on that note, there is no crystal ball. And of course, all you can do is set a strategy. And this is, again, as an advisor, this is something that we do with our clients, but to set a strategy, to set a plan, to make sure it's appropriate, and then to stick to the plan. But knowing your time horizon makes such a difference because, again, if it's short term, your investments are most likely going to be very, very different to something if it's long term. Unless your risk profile, or essentially your risk tolerance, is very, very high, and you're willing to invest in something very risky for just a couple of months. Once you understand all this, and once you know your time frame, once you have an idea as to how much risk you want to expose yourself to, that's when it comes down to setting up an selecting or understanding your investment strategy. And again, having an advisor helps with these things. But when I say investment strategy, I mean understanding what type of profile you're going to have, or whether it's a mix of a few different profiles, whether you're going to be looking at passive investing or active investing, a dynamic asset allocation, a strategic asset allocation. There's all these different terms and all these different types of strategies, we'll say, essentially, which are going to really, they're either going to sit with you very well or they're not going to sit with you well. And you're either going to be comfortable with it or you're not going to be comfortable with it. The hard thing about investments, or any investing, is that, and we hear this all the time, but past performance is not an indicator of future performance. So just because a particular investment has done really, really well in the past, it doesn't mean that it's going to do really, really well in the future. Yes, it might give you some confidence that, and some peace of mind, knowing that, you are going to be making money, but it's never a guarantee. And this is literally the $1 million question. And this is why having these things in place does make a really big difference, because it just means that you've got ways of managing your risk. So as I said earlier, risk is a part of life. And once you understand what type of risks you're willing to take and what the risks are to an investment, then it makes the decision a lot easier. Thanks for joining us on Sharing More Than the Sheets. Please make sure you subscribe to be updated with future episode releases, and feel free to share this episode with any friends or family that you think it might benefit. Please visit us at sharingmorethanthesheets.com.au to submit questions or requests for future podcast topics. These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au.